Ahora invitamos nuevamente a Ricardo Ávila, asesor senior de la Casa Editorial El Tiempo, para la entrevista en vivo a nuestro invitado especial.
Muchas gracias. Aquí me tienen de nuevo, pero les prometo que el cóctel va a tener doble ración de trago por cuenta de la paciencia que hemos tenido. La verdad es que cuando uno escucha a Andrew Winston es difícil no estar de acuerdo con él. Sin embargo, parte de mi papel en estos escenarios es pues hacer de abogado del diablo y plantear las preguntas que probablemente algunos de ustedes se harán cuando lo escuchan referirse a su libro que ha tenido un éxito inmenso, el de Net Positive, y los artículos que él ha escrito en algunas de las revistas especializadas más prestigiosas del mundo. Pues, y ve uno lo que sucede en la controversia pública en referencia a algunos de los puntos que hace. Entonces, con la venia de ustedes voy a pasarme al inglés para hablar con Andrew al respecto. Andrew, let me be blunt in the first question.
Yep.
If ESG is such a great idea, why is there such a huge debate about it? And why is there such a backlash that we have seen in recent months? Just to give you an example, there was a recent article in The Economist about it. Yeah. Why is this debate taking place?
Well, I think there's two questions. Why is it hard in general? I've been in this for 20 years, and there's a lot of answers to that. I mean, a lot of it is that change is hard. People know how to make money the way they make it. It's hard to lead change. Usually it's forced upon you. And there's inertia. But there's also a deeper answer, which is some of the source of the backlash, which there are vested interests. There's people that make money. The largest companies in the world, the oil and gas companies, they make money from the current system. And so, of course, if you were either a petrostate in the Middle East or an Exxon, and on your books are trillions, tens of trillions of dollars of assets that are worthless if we move quickly away from carbon, how much would you spend to make it difficult? To tell people, for years, Exxon and others would tell people, hey, this isn't a big problem. It's a hoax. Now they say it's too expensive or it's going to take too long. So there's really powerful interests that want to keep things the same. And most companies are doing pretty well. The profits of the Fortune Global 500 are about $3 trillion. They make money the way they make money. And so it's difficult to move away from that. But in most business history, companies don't make the shift, the big ones, they're forced, right? And they either go extinct or they buy and bring in the kind of newer, smaller companies that have a new idea about how the world works. And I think that's what's happening.
But allow me to Colombianize this question.
Yeah.
Yes, it is valid to say there are companies who have vested interests in this and don't want change. But for example, a country like ours, Colombia, the most recent data, 30% of its exports are oil, 20% of these exports this year during the first months of 2023 are coal. So yeah. Roughly half of its exports come from fossil fuels. And at the same time, oil in particular is the first contributor in fiscal terms. But mining is not that far behind, or I mean, the kind of mining we have in Colombia. So of course, and now we have a president that basically says, listen, because of climate change, we need to move away from fossil fuels at a very fast pace. Yeah. faster than the rest of the world if needed. And of course, not necessarily industries that people are concerned about the pace of change, because of course we're not a rich country. We are, as you probably know, a very complex country where many problems coexist and where the poverty rate is 37% and so on and so forth. So how do you respond to that?
Well, it's interesting. In the airport yesterday, I happened to see an article, a report from WTW, used to be Tower's parent, a big risk, huge risk management company. And they did reports on a number of countries they said were at risk from the change. And Colombia in particular, they said about 80 billion in economy was at risk in this transition. And it would be a huge hit. So I kind of dreaded, in a way, having this conversation because it's hard. I understand that this country has a huge industry, but it is going away. And it's not because Greenpeace wants it to. It's because increasingly countries and companies see the impacts of climate change. It costs them. They want to reduce those. And the economics of the clean technologies has just gotten much cheaper. I was speaking with the CEO of AEP in the US. It's the largest utility and was the largest emitter in the country. And they're heading towards 80% renewables. And I just asked the CEO, is it just because they're cheaper? And he said, yeah, that's pretty much it. So the economics are changing. And you know, I don't know about the politics here and the president here, but the transition is coming. And I think the countries and industries that don't adapt, they're going to see their core business disappearing quickly. And again, it's exponential. You know, and even if governments don't move fast enough, as I said, the Fortune Global 500, they are 40 trillion in revenue, about a third of the world's GDP. Most of them have reduction goals now. So it's just coming from the demand, right? The companies that make everything, they create the demand for energy. Utilities don't demand energy, right? It's to make things. And those companies are reducing aggressively and plan to get to zero by 2040 or 2050. That's quick. So it's coming.
Yes, at the same time, sometimes you see the world sort of accommodating its goals. Just this week we saw, for example, that Great Britain was pushing forward its goal in terms of, as they would say, petrol cars.
Yeah.
So sometimes, of course, there's original goals versus reality, and sometimes the pace can change. But accepting the fact that, yes, the world is moving away from fossil fuels, I would like to underline what you said in your presentation in terms that the world is going to need 4 times as many minerals as today. And for a country that has had some tradition in mining, such as Colombia, of course, this has huge implications because we know Colombia is an underexplored country, but at the same time, what we know, which is very little so far, is that Colombia has a huge mining potential. At the same time, you find the fundamentalists saying, no mining whatsoever. And, but if what you say is true, and I'm sure you're right, Colombia could benefit, of course, in that sense, doing things, of course, as many other countries will do differently from how things were done before. How do you see the prospects for an emerging economy such as ours in that new world?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the demand for more stuff, more physical stuff is growing. Even the tech-heavy industry, the move to data at the core of the world and business uses a lot of stuff. It's funny the tech industry came up with the cloud as an idea because that sounds very light, but there's actually data centers that are the biggest energy users in the world, right? We need huge amount of material, even for the tech world, let alone for the grid, solar, wind, geothermal, high-speed rail. So if there's environmentalists saying, well, we can't do mines, it's irrational. I mean, there's no way. And, you know, I mean, but there's also environmentalists fighting wind turbines because they kill a few birds, ignoring that climate change is killing species of birds, right? So there's things that aren't rational. And I think companies have to engage with stakeholders and go listen. But some of them, they can ignore, right? And I think this is going to be an incredible opportunity for growth in this sector. I'm seeing just more and more interest in ESG from mining. Just anecdotally, I get asked to more and more mining events like this, which wasn't true, 5 years ago. So I think there's an excitement for how much is going to be needed. I mean, the grid in the grid in the U.S. is going to have to double at least, and that's just us. That's a lot of building, and we have to build quicker than we've ever built before. It's like being on a war footing. It's that kind of pace. So the demand is going to be huge.
What reaction do you have when you hear the term green mining?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what that means. I think, look, every sector is moving down a path to figure out how they can be zero carbon. And like even steel, right? There's companies building these arc furnaces, electric arc furnaces. There's a huge push to plug in the world, plug in the buildings, everything be on the grid, and the grid be almost all renewables.